Music stopped. So did a heartbeat. Welcome to Wolfe's Casebook. I am your host, Enigma. Drop a comment telling me where you're tuning in from. I truly value every reply. Let's investigate. If there's one thing guaranteed to sour Nero Wolfe's digestion, it's an invitation. Not the engraved kind. Those at least have the decency to announce their vulgarity in gold leaf. But the human variety. The kind that walks through the front door of the brownstone on West 35th Street with perfume, urgency, and a problem. It was a Tuesday, which meant orchids until 11, beer at 11:30, lunch at 1:15, and silence where possible. I was at my desk pretending to reconcile a bill from Rustermann's when the doorbell rang. Fritz was in the kitchen composing something delicate and butter-laden, and Wolfe was upstairs communing with his orchids, which he treats with more warmth than most vertebrates. So I got it. On the stoop stood a woman dressed like the aftermath of a champagne toast. Ivory silk, a narrow hat pinned like an afterthought, gloves clutched in one hand. She wasn't crying. She wasn't hysterical. That alone made her interesting. "Is this the residence of Nero Wolfe?" she asked. "It is," I said. "And I'm Archie Goodwin, the advance warning system. If you've come to sell something, we already have it. If you've come to confess something, step inside before the neighbors get ideas." Her mouth twitched. "Good sign. My name is Vivian March," she said. "I need to speak to Mr. Wolfe. It concerns a dinner party." "That's a relief. We haven't had a decent one of those in weeks." She didn't smile this time. It ended in murder. That made two of us who stopped breathing for a second. I ushered her into the office and seated her in the red leather chair opposite Wolfe's desk, the one clients occupy when they're about to realize how expensive their secrets are. Wolfe descended 5 minutes later, which for him is haste bordering on recklessness. He entered like a man prepared to be disappointed. He lowered himself into his custom chair, adjusted his bulk with minor seismic shifts, and regarded Miss March with half-lidded eyes. "Archie," he said, "why is there a stranger in my office during orchid hours?" "Because she claims her dinner party ended in murder," I said. "And she didn't bring leftovers." Wolfe closed his eyes. "Phooey." Miss March didn't flinch. "Mr. Wolfe, I'm not here because someone died. And I'm here because I believe the wrong person will be blamed, and because I suspect the murder was arranged long before dessert." That opened one of Wolfe's eyes. "Explain," he said. She did. 3 nights earlier, she'd hosted a private dinner at her townhouse on East 62nd Street. 8 guests, old friends and newer allies. The occasion was ostensibly a celebration, her appointment as chair of the March Foundation, a philanthropic organization with a history of generous grants and quiet enemies. Among the guests was Daniel Rourke, a financier with a habit of turning other people's ideas into his own fortunes. Before the evening ended, he was found in the library with a letter opener buried neatly between his ribs. No struggle, no overturned furniture, just a body beside a decanter of port. "And the police?" I asked. "They have arrested my assistant," she said. "Thomas Avery. He discovered the body." "Convenient," I said. "Yes," she replied. "Too convenient." Wolfe's fingers met before his chest, a cathedral of contemplation. "You believe Mr. Avery incapable of murder?" he asked. "I believe," she said carefully, "that he is incapable of subtlety. And this was subtle." "Why?" Wolfe's tone sharpened. "On what do you base that distinction?" "Because," she said, "every person at that table had a reason to want Daniel Rourke silenced. Only one of them would have had the patience to orchestrate it." That interested me. "Names," I said, reaching for my notebook. She provided them. Eleanor Vance, art curator, sharp-eyed and sharper-tongued. Once rumored to have been engaged to Rourke before a financial betrayal dissolved both romance and gallery. Doctor. Malcolm Ives, economist, foundation advisor, publicly critical of Rourke's business practices. Julian Kessler, political strategist whose latest campaign had collapsed after Rourke withdrew funding at a critical hour. Lydia Rourke, the victim's estranged wife, still legally bound but socially separated. And Thomas Avery, the assistant now in custody, loyal, meticulous, and present in every room that night. 5 potential suspects, I murmured. A cozy little circle. It was meant to be, Miss March said. I wanted transparency, unity. Ah, I said, there's your first mistake. Wolfe ignored me. You hosted a gathering of individuals bound by mutual distrust and financial entanglement, he said. You served food, wine, and opportunity, and you are surprised that one of them took advantage. I am not surprised, she said quietly. I am afraid. That shifted the air. Of what? Wolfe asked. She hesitated. For the first time, a fissure. Of what was taken from me, she said. Besides a guest? My foundation files, she said. A folder disappeared the same night. Grant allocations for the coming year. Confidential recommendations. If those documents surface, reputations will be ruined. I leaned back. So we've got a corpse and a missing file, I said. Murder and leverage. That's efficient. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. You did not inform the police about the missing file, he said. No. Why? Because they would see it as motive. They would assume Thomas killed Rourke to protect me, or to steal from me, and they would be wrong. Wolfe was silent long enough for me to consider the clock. Orchid hour was nearly over. That mattered. Mr. Wolfe, she said softly, I did not come to you merely to save Thomas Avery. I came because I believe someone used my dinner table as a stage. I want to know who, and I want to know why. Wolfe inhaled. A deep, deliberate intake, like a man considering a second portion of something dangerous. Archie, he said, what is today's luncheon? Braised duck, I said, with cherries. He grimaced faintly. And dinner? Veal. He opened both eyes fully and regarded Miss March. If I accept, he said, you will provide full access to your guests, your household, and any documents in your possession. You will withhold nothing. You will pay my fee, and you will not interrupt my schedule. Of course, she said quickly. And, he added, you will understand that I am not an instrument of your preferences. If Mr. Avery is guilty, I shall demonstrate it. She met his gaze. Now, if he is guilty, I will accept it. That satisfied him more than tears would have. Very well, Wolfe said. Archie will visit your townhouse this afternoon. He will examine the scene and speak to those available. I shall remain here. Naturally. Miss March rose. Thank you, Mr. Wolfe. When she left, the office seemed larger. I swiveled in my chair. You don't like dinner parties, I said. I despise them, Wolfe replied. Then why take this? He adjusted his waistcoat. Because, he said, someone committed murder with forethought in a civilized setting. That is an offense not merely against the law, but against order. I will not have such contamination go unexamined. I grinned. You're protecting civilization now. I'm protecting my digestion, he snapped. So the idea that treachery can be plated beside pâté without consequence is intolerable. There it was. The reason he wouldn't explain to her. I stood. I'll get my hat. As I reached the door, he added, Archie. Yes. Observe everything. Not merely what is said, but what is avoided. A dinner table is a battlefield of glances. And if I get invited to the next one? There will not be a next one, he said. Someone ensured that. I stepped out into the street with my notebook in my pocket, in the faint suspicion that this case wasn't about who had killed Daniel Rourke. It was about who had planned for him to die, and who had benefited before the body was even cold. Back in the brownstone, Nero Wolfe remained seated, eyes closed, already arranging his pieces on a board no one else could see. And I took a cab uptown and spent most of the ride making faces at my own reflection in the window. No, it wasn't vanity. If you can't rehearse suspicion in New York traffic, you're wasting civic resources. Vivian March's townhouse was on a quiet stretch that looked too well fed to tolerate homicide, with a doorman who had the expression of a man paid to forget things. He'd been primed. Miss March's name opened the door like a master key. Inside, the air carried that expensive, anxious cleanliness you only get after people scrub a room not to remove blood, but to remove memory. A tall man in shirt sleeves stood in the front hall, the kind with hair that insists on being neat even when the rest of him is worried. "Mr. Goodwin?" he asked. "That depends. Are you here to arrest me or serve me tea?" He swallowed. "I'm Malcolm Ives. Vivian said you'd be coming." "Dr. Ives," I corrected. "Economist with a conscience. I read the papers." It was a lie. I read headlines when Wolfe wants conversation, but it made him blink. "She's in the drawing room," he said. "This way." We crossed a foyer where a marble bust stared down like it had opinions about poor people. The drawing room was all pale upholstery and carefully arranged books, a room designed to make a guest feel both welcomed and assessed. Vivian March rose when she saw me. She looked different in daylight, still composed, but with a faint strain at the corners, like the night had filed small grievances on her face. She had a glass of water in her hand. Not whiskey. That told me something, too. "Mr. Goodwin," she said. "Thank you for coming so quickly." "Fast is relative," I said. I didn't even stop to commit a felony on the way." A woman seated near the window gave a short laugh that wasn't kind. She had dark hair pinned severely and wore black that looked chosen, not required. Her eyes raked me as if she were deciding whether I belonged in the room. "Eleanor Vance," Vivian said, "and Julian Kessler." Kessler stood by the mantel, an immaculate man with a political smile, wide enough to show teeth, narrow enough to hide appetite. He shook my hand like we were on opposite sides of a deal and he expected to win. "So Wolfe sent the charming one," he said. "He kept the charming one and sent me," I replied. "I'm here to see the library and ask questions nobody likes." Vivian nodded. "Lydia hasn't arrived yet. She said she would come." "Estranged wives are like cats," I said. "So they show up when it suits them and pretend you're lucky." Dr. Ives looked unhappy with my tone, which meant he was either innocent or humorless. I set my hat on a table with enough delicacy to reassure the furniture, then faced Vivian. "I need the sequence," I said. "From the first drink to the last scream. Don't decorate it." Her jaw tightened, but she began. "The guests arrived at 7, dinner at 8. Conversation, some philanthropic, some political, some personal. Daniel Rourke arrived late at 8:15, claiming a delayed call. He'd been in good spirits, according to her, even teasing. Dessert served at 10. Coffee in the drawing room. Then, around 10:30, Rourke excused himself to take a call. Again. He went to the library. Thomas Avery, her assistant, followed 10 minutes later to ask about a schedule item. He found Rourke dead. "Who screamed?" I asked. Vivian's mouth tightened. "Eleanor." Eleanor Vance shrugged. "I'm not ashamed. I dislike dead men less than I dislike surprises." "Did anyone else go to the library?" I asked. Julian Kessler raised his eyebrows. "We all did, after the commotion." "No," I said, "before. Between the time he left and the time Avery found him." Vivian looked at the carpet as if it might supply notes. "Malcolm went to use the telephone," she said. "In the study, adjacent to the library. Julian stepped out to smoke on the terrace. Eleanor went upstairs to powder her nose. Lydia, when she arrived, was in the front hall speaking with Daniel for a moment. My pen paused. Lydia arrived late too. Yes, Vivian said. Around 10:20. And she had words with her husband in the hall. Then he went to the library. Yes. Did anyone see him go in? Dr. Ives spoke. I did. He passed the archway into the library. He was holding a glass of port. Good, I said. So he walked in alive. Eleanor leaned forward. Is this the part where you tell us you're going to save Thomas Avery because your employer is sentimental? I'm not employed by sentiment, I said. That's Wolfe's allergy. I'm employed by facts. If facts save Avery, fine. If facts hang him, that's also fine. Don't faint. The upholstery might not recover. Vivian made a small sound, half reprimand, half relief. She wanted a champion, but she'd hired Wolfe. Wolfe sends you me when he wants the truth to survive contact with people. Show me the library, I said. We moved as a group, which I didn't like. In a murder house, you either want solitude or you want a policeman. A semicircle of tense, curious civilians is the worst of both worlds. But Vivian insisted, and I let it ride. The library was at the back, wood-paneled, warm and overly civilized. A Persian rug anchored the room. A deep chair sat near the fireplace, and a desk stood against the far wall. On the desk, an empty patch of lighter wood suggested something had been removed. That's where the folder was, Vivian said softly. The spot held my attention longer than the chair where a man had died, which is a peculiar thing about some crimes. Death is final. Missing paper keeps moving. Where was the body? I asked. Vivian pointed. Here, near the desk. He fell against the side table. I took in the room the way Wolfe taught me, slow without the urge to make it theatrical. The police had been here. You could smell their presence, the faint chemical tang of fingerprint powder, the scuffed line where someone had moved furniture and then tried to put it back as if remorse could replace precision. On the side table sat a decanter and 2 glasses. One had a lipstick trace. Vivian's, I guessed, unless Daniel Rourke had a flamboyant secret. The other was clean. The letter opener? I asked. Police took it, Vivian said. Of course they did. I walked to the desk. Drawer handles were polished brass. I crouched and pulled one open. It slid smoothly, too smoothly, like it had been used after the dust settled. Inside were neatly arranged stationery supplies. Pens aligned, envelopes squared. You keep your drawers like this? I asked her. Yes, she said. Thomas does. And now Thomas is in custody, I said. And so, who's been tidying? Vivian's eyes flicked to Eleanor Vance. Eleanor didn't deny it. She simply looked bored. I couldn't stand it, Eleanor said. It was a mess. A murder scene is supposed to be a mess, I said. It makes the truth more comfortable. Julian Kessler gave a little laugh. Surely the police documented everything. I straightened and faced him. If you're relying on the thoroughness of New York City bureaucracy to save your skin, Mr. Kessler, I suggest you start praying. Dr. Ives cleared his throat. What are you looking for? A reason the wrong man got arrested, I said, and then I turned back to the desk. The lighter patch on the desktop had a faint outline. The impression of a folder, yes, but also a rectangle beneath it, as if something small had rested there and been moved. Then I ran my fingertips lightly over the wood and felt a barely perceptible ridge. Tape residue. I looked up at Vivian. Was anything taped here? She frowned. No, not that I know. Thomas ever tape notes to your desk? He's precise, she said. He uses paperweights. That was my second good sign of the day. An assistant who doesn't tape notes. Tape is for people who panic. I stepped closer and inhaled near the desk edge. There was a scent under the polish. Sharp, herbal, familiar. At home, Wolfe would have identified it with contempt in 3 syllables. I only needed one. "A niece," I murmured. Vivian blinked. "What?" I straightened, smiling slightly because the room had just handed me something it didn't mean to. "Nothing," I said. "Just a spice that doesn't belong in a library." And as I said it, the front doorbell rang somewhere in the house. Firm, impatient. Vivian's face tightened. "That will be Lydia," she said. Or, I thought, that will be the next move on the board. Vivian went to answer the door herself, which told me something about Lydia Rourke before I even met her. Hosts don't greet estranged wives personally unless guilt, fear, or strategy is involved. The rest of us remained in the library. No one spoke. Kessler examined his cufflinks as if they might confess. Dr. Ives stood with his hands folded behind his back, studying the rug. Eleanor Vance wandered to the bookshelves and ran a finger along the spines, not looking at any of us. I stayed by the desk. A niece. It didn't belong with leather bindings and philanthropic budgets. It belonged in a kitchen, or a drink, or on the breath of someone who wanted to disguise something stronger. Footsteps approached, heels measured and deliberate. Lydia Rourke entered without haste and without apology. She wore grey, not mourning black, not widow white. Her face was composed in a way that suggested rehearsal. She was beautiful in a disciplined way, as if beauty were a contract she had signed and intended to honor. "Miss March," she said evenly. "Dr. Ives, Eleanor, Julian." Her gaze came to me last. "And you must be Mr. Wolfe." I smiled. "I left the orchids at home. Archie Goodwin." A flicker of recognition. Of course. She didn't offer her hand. That was fine. I wasn't sure I'd have taken it. "I understand you're reviewing what happened," she said. "That's a gentle word for it," I replied. "As we're trying to determine who used your husband as a punctuation mark." Her eyes didn't move. Daniel used himself that way often. There it was. Clean, sharp resentment. Not hysteria. Not grief. Something colder. "You spoke to him in the hall," I said. "Shortly before he went to the library." "Yes." "What about?" She glanced at Vivian. "Do we have to do this now?" "Yes," I said. A small pause. Then she nodded. "He wanted to discuss a revision to his will," she said. "Specifically, his intention to alter the Foundation's funding structure." Vivian stiffened. "Alter how?" I asked. "He believed," Lydia continued, "that certain grants were being allocated with excessive discretion." "That's a pretty phrase," I said. "Did he mean favoritism?" "He meant he intended to exert more control." Vivian's voice was tight. Said Daniel had no authority over the Foundation. "He had influence," Lydia said, "and he knew it." I let that settle. Influence can move paper faster than authority ever could. "Did he threaten you?" I asked Vivian. "He suggested," she said carefully, "that public disagreement would be unfortunate." "And you?" I turned back to Lydia. "Were you pleased with his philanthropic enthusiasm?" "I was not pleased with anything Daniel did," she said. "But his financial instincts were rarely foolish. Except," Eleanor said lightly from the shelves, "in matters of marriage." Lydia's eyes flicked toward her. No heat, just acknowledgement. "You were in the hall," I said. "Did anyone see you leave him?" "The doorman," she said. "And Thomas Avery passed through." "Did you enter the library?" "No." "Did you smell anything unusual?" I asked, and a faint crease appeared between her brows. "Unusual?" "Spices," I said. "Liquor. Cologne." Her gaze sharpened. He had been drinking. Port, I believe. "Anything else?" "No." She didn't hesitate. That didn't mean she was telling the truth. It meant she was used to answering without it. I walked slowly around the desk again, tracing the outline where the missing folder had been. Mr. Rourke intended to change funding allocations, I said. The folder containing those allocations disappeared the same night he died. That's either coincidence or choreography. Julian Kessler cleared his throat. Are you implying someone killed Daniel for access to grant recommendations? I'm implying someone saw advantage, I said. Murder is expensive. It needs a return. Dr. Ives shifted. This is grotesque. Death often is, I said. But paperwork is tidy. Someone wanted those documents. Eleanor turned from the shelves, or someone wanted to prevent them from becoming public. Also tidy, I agreed. I crouched again by the desk, this time examining the lower paneling. The scent of anise was faint but persistent near the right edge, not on the surface, lower near the seam where the panel met the floor. Miss March, I said without looking up, who cleans this room? Thomas, she said, and the housekeeper in the mornings. When was the last time before the party? That afternoon. And since the police left? Yesterday. Eleanor insisted. Eleanor didn't apologize. I dislike dust. I stood. Does anyone here cook? I asked. Blank looks. Then Dr. Ives lifted a hand slightly. I do, occasionally. Use a nice? I asked. So no. Julian? I prefer restaurants. Eleanor? I prefer gin. Lydia? She held my gaze. I prefer not to answer culinary surveys. Fair enough. I moved to the side table with the decanter. 2 glasses. One with a lipstick trace. One clean. Who poured the port? I asked. Vivian answered. I did. For whom? For Daniel and for myself. And the second glass? She hesitated. I poured only one. Then why are there 2? Silence again. This one heavier. Julian stepped closer. Are you suggesting someone shared a drink with him? I'm suggesting there are 2 glasses, I said. One was used, one wasn't. Either someone poured and didn't drink, or someone drank and someone cleaned. Dr. Ives shook his head. The police would have noticed. The police notice fingerprints, I said. They don't always notice intention. I turned back to Lydia. When you spoke to your husband, I said, was he agitated? He was amused, she replied. He believed he was about to win an argument. With whom? She glanced at Vivian again. With the table. That was interesting. So at dinner, I said, there was disagreement. There is always disagreement, Julian said smoothly. That's what makes conversation. About funding? I pressed. About control, Eleanor said. Dr. Ives exhaled slowly. Daniel wanted to centralize oversight. He believed certain allocations were too personal. Meaning? I asked. Meaning, Ives said reluctantly, that Vivian's recommendations occasionally favored organizations with which she had prior relationships. Vivian's chin lifted. Transparent relationships. Of course, Ives said quickly, and I let the air tighten. So Daniel challenges funding, I summarized. Lydia supports his instincts, but not his marriage. Julian needs money for campaigns. Eleanor's gallery once collapsed after Daniel withdrew support. Dr. Ives advises on economics. Thomas manages files. And one of us, Eleanor said softly, stabbed him with a letter opener. I nodded. Yes. The front hall clock chimed the 1/4 hour. The sound cut through the room like a metronome, steady, indifferent. I stepped closer to the desk one last time and ran my finger along the lower seam. When I brought it up, there was the faintest tackiness. I rubbed thumb and forefinger together. Adhesive. And beneath it, unmistakable. Anise. Not from the decanter, not from the guest's breath, from something that had been attached to this desk and removed. I straightened slowly. Miss March, I said, before the party, did anyone besides Thomas handle this folder? No, she said. It was delivered to me that afternoon. Thomas placed it there. Sealed? Yes. With what? She frowned. With a small label. Why? I looked at the others, one by one. Because, I said, someone removed that folder carefully. Carefully enough to leave tape residue and the scent of anise oil. Dr. Ives blinked. Anise oil? Used in some adhesives, I said lightly. Also in certain specialty envelopes. Julian's smile thinned. And, I added, in some imported cigarillos. No one spoke. But in that silence, I saw it. The briefest tightening around Julian Kessler's mouth. Not fear, recognition, and that was enough for now. Julian Kessler's expression recovered quickly, which is what men do when their livelihoods depend on recovering quickly. But the recovery wasn't perfect. It had that faint overcorrection you see when someone smooths a wrinkle by yanking the whole sheet. I didn't press him in front of the others. Wolfe once told me, between bites of shad and contempt, that the best way to lose a confession is to demand it as a public performance. People will sacrifice truth just to avoid looking cornered. So I took the room apart the way you dismantle a watch, quietly and one piece at a time. Vivian, I said, I want to see the terrace. Julian's eyes flicked toward the French doors. He had stepped out to smoke there, according to Vivian's timeline. The terrace was a broad stone platform with planters and a view that made you feel the city had been put there for your convenience. The cold air had teeth. That also meant anyone who stepped out to smoke did it for a reason. Did the police search out here? I asked. They walked through, Vivian said. They didn't linger. Of course not, I said. It's outdoors. No one ever expects motive to survive fresh air. I moved along the edge near the planters, scanning for the small betrayals people think are invisible. Ash, crushed leaves, a snapped match. Near the third planter, I found what I wanted, a cigarette butt ground into the stone, but not the usual cheap paper stub. This one was slender, wrapped in a brownish leaf, with a faint, sweet smell that didn't belong to tobacco. I bent, pinched it with my handkerchief, and held it up. Julian Kessler stepped forward too quickly. That could be anyone's, he said. That's the thing, I replied. It couldn't. Not unless everyone smokes imported cigarillos with anise notes. His mouth tightened again, the same brief clamp of recognition. I don't smoke, Dr. Ives said behind me, a little too loudly, like innocence was a vote. I didn't ask, I said. Eleanor leaned on the doorframe, amused. Julian has expensive habits. It doesn't make him a murderer. No, I agreed, but it might make him a convenient courier. Vivian's voice was careful. Archie, what does this have to do with the folder? Maybe nothing, I said. Or maybe someone used the same adhesive to seal the folder that seals certain imported cigarillo packages. The kind sold in boutique shops where nobody asks why you want anonymity. Julian's laugh came out thin. This is absurd. Absurd is a man being found neatly dead beside a decanter while the important paperwork strolls out the front door, I said. This is just uncomfortable. I slipped the cigarillo remnant into my pocket in my handkerchief like it was a jewel. Then I turned to Vivian. I want to speak to the doorman, I said, and your housekeeper, separately. Vivian hesitated only a moment, then nodded and led me back inside. Dr. Ives lingered near the library entrance, uncertain whether to look offended or helpful. Eleanor drifted away like a cat bored with the room. Julian remained by the terrace doors, hands in his pockets, smiling the way men smile when they're calculating. The doorman was in the foyer, an older man with a posture that suggested he'd been hired as much for discretion as for muscle. His name, he told me, was Mr. Salerno. Mr. Salerno, I said, you saw Lydia Rourke arrive the night of the party? Yes, sir. And Daniel Rourke spoke with her? Yes. Did anyone else arrive late? I asked. He frowned, thinking. Mr. Kessler left and came back. Vivian's head snapped toward him. "Julian." Mr. Salerno looked apologetic. He stepped out, around 10 maybe, returned a few minutes later. Julian had said he went to smoke on the terrace, which he might have. But stepping out the front door was a different kind of movement. "You're sure it was the front?" I asked. "Yes." He asked if there were any calls waiting. Then he went out. I turned to Vivian. "Any calls?" "There were none," she said. I said. "So he went out to check for something that wasn't there, or to meet someone who was." Mr. Salerno added, "And after the trouble, a delivery boy came." "A delivery boy," I said. Vivian's eyes widened. "No one told me." Salerno shrugged slightly. "It was chaos, Miss March. He held a small parcel. I assumed it was for Mr. Avery. I gave it to him." My pulse ticked up. A parcel for Avery. What did it look like? Brown paper? String? The boy said it was urgent. "Did you see a label?" "Only the name. Avery. And this address." I pictured Thomas Avery in a police precinct being fitted for handcuffs, while a parcel labeled urgent landed in his hands like a final accusation. "Where is it now?" I asked. Vivian swallowed. "If Thomas had it, the police may have taken it. Or it vanished," I said. "Like the folder." I made a note and went for the housekeeper. She was in the kitchen, hands red from soap and work, eyes wary. Vivian introduced her as Mrs. Paley. "Mrs.?" Paley looked at me as if I were another officer with better manners. "Mrs. Paley," I said, "did you see anyone go into the library after dessert?" "No, sir," she said promptly. Too promptly. "Try again," I said. "But this time, answer the question I asked." Her mouth tightened. She glanced at Vivian. Vivian said quietly, "Mrs. Paley, please. Mr. Wolfe is trying to help us." Mrs. Paley exhaled. I saw Miss Vance come in. Just a moment. She stood by the desk and looked at something. Then she left. Eleanor, tidying yesterday, dust-hating, and present at the desk the night of the murder. That was interesting. It didn't mean guilt. It meant opportunity. "Did she take anything?" I asked. "I don't know," Mrs. Paley said. "I wasn't meant to see, but she had a small bottle in her hand." "A bottle?" I repeated. "Like perfume," Mrs. Paley said. Or medicine. She dabbed something on her wrist. Anise oil, maybe. Or something used to soften adhesive, or to cover the smell of something else." I thanked her and went back to the drawing room. Vivian hovered near the doorway, trying to keep her composure from cracking. "Vivian," I said, "I'm going to need access to Thomas Avery's workspace, his desk, his files, anything he kept that wasn't yours." She nodded quickly. "Of course." "And I'm going to call Nero Wolfe," I added, "because if there was an urgent parcel addressed to Avery after the murder, that's not an accident. That's a message." Julian Kessler was still in the room, and he turned as I pulled out my phone. "Calling Wolfe already," he said lightly. "Yes," I said. "He likes to know when the plot thickens, and it helps his appetite." I stepped into the foyer for privacy and dialed the brownstone. Fritz answered. I asked for Wolfe. After a few seconds, his voice came on, warm with annoyance. "Archie." "Wolfe," I said. "I've got a spice-scented residue at the desk where the missing folder sat, and a cigarillo stub on the terrace with the same anise note. Also, the doorman reports Kessler stepped out the front door around 10, not just the terrace. And, this is the one I want you to savor, after the murder, an urgent parcel addressed to Thomas Avery was delivered and handed to him." There was a pause long enough for me to picture Wolfe's eyelids lifting. "A parcel?" he said. "After the murder." "Yes." "Describe Miss Vance," he said suddenly. I blinked. Elegant, sharp, bored, capable of murder in a gallery opening without wrinkling her dress. I did not ask for your editorial, Wolfe snapped. Her habits. She hates dust, I said. And according to the housekeeper, she entered the library briefly after dessert, looked at the desk, and had a small bottle, perfume-sized. Dabbed it on her wrist. Ah, Wolfe murmured. A solvent. Or a perfume used to mask one. Exactly, I said. So what do you want? I want, Wolfe said, you to obtain the identity of the stationer who supplied the folder seal, and I want Saul Panzer. I figured you might, I said. You will return to the brownstone, he said, with the cigarillo remnant. Do not lose it. It may be more valuable than the victim's heart. Hard to misplace, I said. It smells like licorice and bad intentions. And Archie, Wolfe added, his voice sharpening, thus do not allow yourself to be distracted by theatrics. The missing folder is not incidental. It is the hinge. Understood, I said. Anything else? Yes, he said. Before you leave that house, inspect Mr. Avery's desk. If there is a gap where something has been removed, you will discover what it was. I smiled into the phone. Wolfe, I said, you really know how to make a man feel like he's playing catch-up in his own life. That, he replied, is your natural condition. He hung up. I slid the phone into my pocket and turned back toward the drawing room, where Vivian March waited with the strained patience of a woman watching her world being rearranged. Mrs. Paley said Eleanor went into the library after dessert, I told her as I walked. And your doorman says Julian left the house around 10. Vivian's eyes widened, then narrowed. Why didn't anyone tell me? Because dinner parties are built on omissions, I said. Now show me Thomas Avery's desk. As she led me down the hall, I felt the case tightening. Paper, perfume, and a parcel delivered in the chaos like a planted seed. And somewhere, behind polite faces and carefully chosen words, someone was counting on the fact that nobody notices the small movements in a crowded room. Thomas Avery's workspace was tucked behind the main floor, an anteroom that smelled faintly of ink, lemon polish, and controlled anxiety. It was the kind of room that exists to keep chaos from spilling into the public areas. A narrow desk, a filing cabinet, a wall calendar with neat handwriting, and a small safe built into the shelving. Everything had a place, and everything looked like it had been returned to its place by someone who didn't want to admit they'd touched it. That last part was the first thing I noticed. You said the police searched here, I told Vivian. Yes, she said. They took some papers. Thomas's appointment book. His keys. And you haven't been in since? I asked. She shook her head. No. Good, I said, and then I looked around as if I didn't believe her. The desk blotter was square, not skewed. The pen set sat in perfect alignment with the desk edge. The top drawer was closed fully, not left a fraction open. If cops had rummaged, they'd have left something wrong. If Vivian had been here, she'd have left something emotional. This room was neither wrong nor emotional. It was corrected. Who's been in here, Vivian? I asked quietly. Her eyes darted. No one. I stared at her until she exhaled. Mrs. Paley, she admitted, to clean. She insisted the room looked disturbed. Cleaners don't correct, I said. They wipe. Someone corrected. Vivian's face tightened, but she didn't argue. I went to the desk and opened the top drawer. Inside were paper clips sorted by size, a ruler, a stamp pad, and a small envelope marked with a tidy hand. Receipts, foundation. Second drawer, index cards, typed labels, and a spiral notebook with pages torn out cleanly. That caught my eye. Thomas tear pages out? I asked. Vivian hesitated. He copies notes sometimes, for filing. I flipped the notebook carefully. Several pages were missing in a sequence, too many to be copying. Someone had removed a chunk of story. I slid the notebook aside and checked the wastebasket. Empty. lined with a fresh bag, and that settled it. Someone had been tidy with intent. I moved to the filing cabinet. The top drawer was labeled March Foundation, Confidential. I pulled it open and scanned folders. They were alphabetized, tabbed, and edged in a way that made me think Thomas Avery would rather be imprisoned than misfile something. One folder, Rourke, Daniel, looked slightly newer than its neighbors. The label was crisp. The paper edge was too white, as if it had been replaced. I pulled it. Inside were clipped articles, correspondence, and a typed memo about a meeting scheduled for next week. Nothing that screamed murder. But the clip used to bind the memo wasn't Thomas's style. It was cheap, bent, and nervous. Thomas would use a brass fastener, Vivian murmured behind me, almost to herself. I turned. So you do know his habits? She swallowed. Yes. Good, I said. Then tell me whose habits these are. She didn't answer. I went to the shelving and found the safe. It was small, the kind meant for documents and jewelry, not diamonds. A keypad with faint smudges. Somebody had punched those numbers recently. Do you know the code? I asked. No, Vivian said quickly. Only Thomas. That, I said, is either true or a very expensive lie. She flinched, but held her ground. I didn't have time to break safes. I had time to notice details. On the shelf above the safe sat a stack of stationery boxes. One was slightly askew, like it had been pulled and shoved back without love. I opened it. Inside were envelopes and seals. Small circular labels, pale cream, the sort used to close a packet neatly. I lifted one and brought it near my nose. Anise. Not strong, as but present, the faint licorice note I'd caught at the library desk. I nodded slowly. Well, hello, I told the stationery. Vivian stared. That's from the stationer. It's nothing. It's a signature, I said. Some stationers use scented gum, oils, whatever they think makes their product memorable. This one chose licorice, which is a choice and therefore a clue. I took the box with me and returned to the desk. I checked the phone log pad beside the handset. Tight columns, disciplined times, and there, 3 days ago, the night of the party, was a time entry at 10:07. No number, just a word. Parcel. I looked up at Vivian. Thomas wrote this after the murder? Or before? She leaned in, eyes narrowing. Before. That's before Daniel was found. My eyebrows rose. So Thomas anticipated a parcel arriving around 10:07 on the night of the party. Julian Kessler had stepped out around 10, the doorman said, and a delivery boy arrived later, in the chaos, addressed to Avery. 2 parcels, or 1 parcel with good timing and bad intentions. Who would send Thomas a parcel during a dinner party? I asked. Vivian's voice was thin. No one. He wouldn't allow it. I tapped the page, but it happened, or at least he expected it. I heard footsteps in the hall. Before I could turn, Eleanor Vance appeared in the doorway, eyes taking in the room with quick assessment. Finding secrets in the help's quarters? She asked, voice smooth. Finding habits, I said, the kind that get people arrested. Eleanor's gaze flicked to the stationery box in my hand. For a fraction of a second, something like annoyance passed over her face. Stationery, she said. How thrilling. Thrilling is relative, I replied. You went into the library after dessert. I already told Vivian, she said. I went to fetch my wrap. The library is on the route. Not that route, I said. Mrs. Paley saw you by the desk. Eleanor's smile was almost affectionate. Mrs. Paley sees everything. It's her job. Yours too, I suppose. And the little bottle? I asked. She held up her wrist in a graceful gesture. Perfume, if you must know. Some of us don't enjoy smelling like other people's tragedies. Do you enjoy smelling like anise? I asked. Her eyes sharpened. Licorice? No. Too bad, I said, because it's in your vicinity more than once. Vivian's voice cut in, controlled but strained. Eleanor, please, Archie is trying to help. Eleanor turned to her. Help you, or help Thomas? Vivian stiffened. Help the truth. Eleanor nodded slowly. An admirable phrase. It usually means someone is about to be hurt. She left the doorway, and as she did, Julian Kessler appeared behind her, like he'd been waiting for an opening. You're interrogating my friends now, he said lightly. I'm interrogating your movements, I said. You stepped out the front door around 10. Julian's smile stayed in place, but his eyes cooled. I went out for air. Through the front door, I said, with a terrace available. I needed to take a call, he said smoothly. The doorman says you asked if any calls were waiting, I said. There were none. Julian shrugged. Perhaps he misunderstood. Perhaps, I said. You met a delivery boy. A small silence. Not dramatic. It was just enough. Vivian spoke, startled. Julian, did you... He held up a hand. Vivian, don't be ridiculous. I didn't deliver anything to Thomas Avery. I didn't say you did, I replied. I said you might have met a delivery boy, the kind who hands over a parcel and walks away without learning the consequences. Julian's jaw tightened. This is speculation. That's my job, I said. Then Wolfe turns it into certainty. His eyes flicked. Wolfe isn't here. No, I agreed. He's at home, comfortable, and already arranging you on the board. Julian's smile returned, but it was all teeth now. If you're implying I killed Daniel Rourke, I'm implying nothing yet, I said. I'm collecting, like a child with ugly stones. Vivian stepped between us, voice low. Archie, what do we do now? I looked at the notebook with its missing pages, and on the stationery box with its scented seals and the word parcel written in Thomas Avery's hand before the murder had even been discovered. We do the next simple thing, I said. We find out what Thomas expected to arrive at 10:07, who sent it, and why someone made sure the police took it, or thought they did. I slipped the stationery box into my coat pocket and took out my phone again. And then, I added, we make a call to the stationer. Because if there's one thing Wolfe loves more than orchids, it's a chain of proof that leads from a tiny scent to a human mistake. And the air in that little anteroom, faintly sweet with licorice and tension, told me someone had made more than one mistake. They'd just counted on nobody noticing the smell. Late afternoon light filtered through the tall windows of the brownstone, is settling over Wolfe's office like a deliberate curtain call. By then, the pieces had been gathered, not by haste, but by method. Saul Panzer had made 2 quiet visits, one to a discreet tobacconist on Madison who confirmed Julian Kessler's fondness for imported and scented cigarillos, and another to a boutique stationer who supplied March Foundation envelopes sealed with a distinctive licorice-infused gum, custom orders placed through Thomas Avery's meticulous accounts. And one more fact, small but decisive. A messenger service receipt, recovered from the precinct's inventory, showed that a parcel addressed to Thomas Avery had been delivered at 10:32 p.m., 20 minutes after Daniel Rourke had entered the library. The parcel contained nothing but blank paper and one thing more, a duplicate set of Foundation allocation drafts, unsigned. And Wolfe had read the receipt twice. Then he had closed his eyes. Now they were all assembled in the office. Vivian March pale but resolute, Eleanor Vance composed, Dr. Ives stiff with dread, Lydia Rourke cool as stone, and Julian Kessler wearing confidence like a tailored coat that no longer quite fit. I remained at my desk, notebook closed. Wolfe sat behind his own, immovable, hands resting upon the armrests as if the wood itself required discipline. Ladies and gentlemen, Wolfe began, his voice calm and resonant. You were present at a dinner party that concluded with murder. You have since endured speculation. I shall now relieve you of uncertainty." Julian shifted slightly. "Finally." "Yes," Wolfe said mildly. "Finally." He turned his gaze to Vivian. "Miss March, that your foundation files were sealed with a distinctive adhesive containing anise oil. This scent was detected upon your library desk after the disappearance of the allocation folder." Vivian nodded faintly. Wolfe continued. "The same anise note was present upon a cigarillo found upon your terrace, a brand favored by one Mr. Julian Kessler." Julian gave a short laugh. "Circumstantial." "Entirely," Wolfe agreed, "until one considers timing." He lifted a paper from his desk. Saul's report. At 10:07 p.m., Thomas Avery noted the anticipated arrival of a parcel. At approximately 10:10, Mr. Kessler exited the townhouse through the front door under the pretense of checking for telephone messages. At 10:15, Mr. Rourke entered the library alive. At 10:32, a parcel addressed to Mr. Avery was delivered during the confusion following the discovery of the body. Julian's jaw tightened. Wolfe's voice did not rise. The parcel contained duplicate drafts of foundation allocations, drafts which Mr. Rourke had intended to contest that evening, drafts which, if publicly altered, would have shifted funding in ways advantageous to Mr. Kessler's political clients. Silence pressed inward. "You arranged," Wolfe said, looking directly at Julian now, "for Mr. Avery to expect a parcel. You created a paper trail suggesting his interest in those documents. When Mr. Rourke confronted Miss March and later retired to the library, you seized the opportunity." Julian's smile flickered. "This is fiction." "No," Wolfe said softly. "It is strategy." He leaned back slightly. "You entered the library shortly after Mr. Rourke, as you shared a glass of port, or poured one at least, to create the appearance of company. The unused glass remained. You removed the allocation folder, breaking its seal, and carried it concealed beneath your coat. The anise adhesive transferred faintly to the desk surface." Julian's hands were clenched now. "You then returned to the terrace to compose yourself, discarding your cigarillo. Later, you ensured the parcel, prepared earlier, was delivered to Thomas Avery during the chaos. The intention was clear. If suspicion fell upon Mr. Avery, the existence of those duplicate drafts would imply motive. Theft, collusion, even murder." Vivian gasped softly. Dr. Ives whispered, "Good God." Wolfe's gaze hardened. "You miscalculated one detail, Mr. Kessler. You assumed the murder would be viewed as impulsive, an argument turned violent. But the wound was precise, controlled. Mr. Rourke was struck before he could react. That indicates forethought." Julian's composure cracked. "You have no proof I struck him." "I do not require your confession," Wolfe replied. "The police will be content with the parcel receipt, the tobacconist's testimony, and the stationer's records linking your intermediary to the purchase of duplicate seals. You employed someone to replicate the adhesive scent in order to frame Mr. Avery convincingly. Unfortunately for you, scent lingers longer than deception." Julian's face drained of color. "You wanted control over the Foundation's allocations," Wolfe continued. "Mr. Rourke's challenge threatened your influence. By eliminating him and implicating Mr. Avery, you anticipated two results: silence and leverage." Julian stood abruptly. "This is outrageous." Archie, that would be me, rose as well, though more casually. "Sit down," I said pleasantly. "You'll only make it worse." For a long second, Julian seemed poised to bolt. But flight requires hope, and Wolfe had removed that. He sank back into his chair. Vivian's voice trembled. "Julian, why?" Julian looked at her then, and the veneer was gone. "Because influence is survival," he said quietly. "Daniel was going to dismantle everything. You would have followed him." Vivian recoiled as if struck. Wolfe inclined his head. There is your motive. Lydia Rourke exhaled, long and steady. Daniel always underestimated ambition. Yes, Wolfe said, as do most men who believe themselves indispensable. The room felt smaller now, not from fear, but from clarity. The chaos had shape, the scent had origin, the parcel had purpose. Sir Wolfe pressed a button on his desk. Fritz appeared almost instantly. "Fritz," Wolfe said calmly, "please telephone Inspector Kramer." Julian closed his eyes. When the police arrived, there was no struggle. Strategy had replaced theatrics. The evidence, once laid in sequence, formed a line too straight to bend. After they were gone, and the others had drifted out with expressions ranging from grief to quiet vindication, the brownstone settled again into its accustomed hush. Vivian remained a moment longer. "Thank you, Mr. Wolfe," she said. Wolfe inclined his head. "Guard your table more carefully in future, Miss March. Hospitality is not immunity." When she left, silence returned like a loyal servant. Fritz announced dinner, veal, prepared with exactitude. Wolfe adjusted himself in his chair, with satisfaction not in his expression but in the absence of irritation. "Well, Archie," he said, "what have we learned?" "That dinner parties are dangerous," I replied, "and licorice is treacherous." "Pfui," he muttered. "We have learned that ambition without restraint corrodes judgment. Mr. Kessler mistook cunning for intelligence." "And what's the difference?" I asked. Wolfe folded his napkin with care. "Cunning," he said, "seeks advantage. Intelligence anticipates consequence." I considered that while cutting into the veal. "Think he anticipated this?" I asked. Wolfe's eyes closed briefly in satisfaction. "No," he said. "He anticipated applause." I leaned back in my chair, listening to the quiet of the brownstone restored to order. Outside, the city moved on, indifferent as ever. Inside, the orchids would be misted in the morning. So the files would be squared, and Wolfe would resume his throne as if murder were merely an interruption in digestion. And me? I made a note to avoid invitations involving port, philanthropy, or licorice. Because if there's one thing I've learned working for Nero Wolfe, it's this: the smallest scent can unravel the grandest performance. And somewhere, in a cell that smelled far less pleasant than a knees, Julian Kessler was probably realizing the same thing.